Redefining Society and Technology, a podcast about technology, cybersecurity and society, hosted by Marco Ciappelli. Let's face it, the future is now. We live in a hybrid, analog, digital society, and it's time to stop ignoring the profound impact technology has on our lives. The line between the physical and virtual worlds, it's no longer real, just a figment of our imagination. We're constantly juggling convenience, privacy, freedom, security, and even the future of humanity in a precarious balancing act. There's no better place than here, and no better time than now to reflect on our relationship with technology and redefine what society means in this new age.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode which is a little bit of a hybrid between an on location, which usually is with me and Sean Martin, where we cover events around the world, and the Redefining Society and Technology podcast. And I decided to opt for this one, even if I just said it's a hybrid episode, because we talk about a brand new event which is called the Global Space Awards, taking place in December, and we'll go more into detail at actually the Natural History Museum in London, which I was there a few months ago. Crazy beautiful place, and just mixing history, natural history with space and technology, to me it's already a beautiful spectacle in my head. We're going to talk about this award. We're going to be here with Sanj, that is right there in London. He's part of the organization, and we're going to discover what it is. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Marco. Looking forward to the discussion around the awards themselves, but also diving a bit deeper into space and why it's such an important time for space as a domain.
Yeah, I think it's always an important time to talk about space, but I feel like now, after a few years of, not that things didn't happen, they've always happened, but now I think we're back to talk a little bit more about it. Not as much as the time of the Apollo mission, which was a very special time, I think.
But exactly.
I don't know if you got the connection here, but there is a reason, of course, why I brought up the Apollo mission, because a big part of the event is actually connected with Jim Lovell, which has been a big part of NASA, big part of the space exploration. So before we dive into that, I would like to hear a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with this event and what you do, and feel free to start talking about the event as well. I'm very curious.
Yeah, sure. So kind of starting at the very early stages of my career, I had my own business, sold that on, and ended up in total serendipity, ended up in wealth management, but very much from a ventures and structures point. So looking at how to structure personal pensions, different trusts, different types of tax structures for investing into early stage businesses. And through different kind of connections, I ended up unlocking some money for space investments back in 2016, and did that via private pensions here in the UK market. It was a very, very funny but quite intense point with compliance, as I'm sure you can imagine, because they were looking at me thinking I was going crazy. How and why are you putting high risk investments into a pension structure? I still stand by the fact that pensions make absolute sense for these types of investments. And luckily, the investments we did in 2016 actually returned very well for those investors who came in through their pensions. So from that side, I ended up on the fund management side, having done those deals from the wealth management and pension side, then got into fund management, where I was working on a UK-centric deep tech fund. And then from there, I went over and joined Type 1 as a GP, and really looking at why and how we can kind of harness the innovation that's happening, and with the right capital structures around them, and getting those ideation right through to scale type businesses within space within automation, robotics, computation, and biotech.
And
so yeah, that's my background.
Well, that's a good reason for you to be actually part of this event. Of course, I have looked at the awards that you're giving away. So there's kind of a celebration of a big part of the NASA space history. Of course, we mentioned the awards to James Lovell, the Legacy Award. For people that don't know who he is, they probably haven't looked at space much or history of space. But you're also giving awards to companies and individuals that are investing, they're very, very active in what's going to be the future. So why don't we start, as you maybe help us to introduce the event, to kind of like paint the picture without taking hours, of course, that we don't have, of what is the next news about space, where we're standing, where we're going, and of course a touch on the legacy of Lovell. It's necessary as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We could probably do a whole session just on James Lovell and the impact that he and the early astronauts had on the industry. But in terms of the event and the kind of the genesis of the Global Space Awards, it's such an exciting time overall at the moment for space, and that's because of the way that the dynamics in the industry are shifting. We are seeing space launch come down drastically, and a lot of that thanks to the likes of SpaceX and the innovation behind that, but also then the innovation that's happened within SpaceX and being applied by other launch companies as well. So all that coming through has led to the cost of launch coming down drastically. So back in the kind of 70s, 80s, when governments first started funding space and space exploration and looking at the ISS and the missions to the moon, etc., you're looking at kind of anything from $80,000 per kilogram upwards. And now we've got to a stage where, because of the cadence of launch and the cost of launch, you're looking at in the region of $3,000 per launch, $3,000 per kilogram for launching. So all of a sudden, things that were only ever feasible for governments have now become feasible for commercial and corporate use. It makes sense on a commercial scale. It makes sense from a financial perspective to start utilizing this amazing domain and environment that we have got around our planet. And what's ended up happening is you're seeing more and more different types of research going through. You're seeing the opportunity to fund ideas and businesses from a very kind of like seed level with only $1 million, $2 million, and them getting to space within that budget, within that investment round. Previously, you wouldn't be able to launch anything to space without anything less than $50 million or however many millions that you needed. So that huge shift has opened up this domain. And I keep referring to space as a domain because it's not a sector. Space as a whole goes into a lot of different sectors. It's anything from our food supply and agriculture right through to pharmaceuticals, even defense, telecoms, connectivity, etc. Space actually it's a domain that overrides many, many, many different sectors and things that we as humanity engage with on a daily basis. So with this now becoming more commercially feasible, it's actually making more sense for the big corporates, for even small startups, to be able to benefit from that domain, utilize that domain, and actually put things that we weren't ever able to do previously now into practice. So from that perspective of like the snapshot of space and where things are shifted or how things are shifted, what I noticed, and a lot of people in the industry talk about this, is like every industry creates its own echo chambers, which is great. We all need to have those conferences and the events where you have all of the space people coming together to have discussions about the industry. But we haven't really in the space domain got an event that really shines a light on the excellence within the full domain, but also then encompasses other businesses that are at the peripheries of space or are utilizing space in different ways. So the idea of this event was to really bring that together in a kind of celebrating the success and the excellence right from research through to scaling up and partnerships and investments all together and creating a red carpet moment.
I love it. And you kind of need to do that because a lot of people do look back to what it used to be a very, very excited time. I mean, you look at the video, 1969 was actually the year I was born, yeah. So I wasn't on the TV watching it, but I swear I've seen that many, many times. The Apollo 8, the first time around the moon where, actually Lovell was. And then, they didn't get to land there. So it was kind of like one of those Apollo 13 with the movie, one of those moments that he proved that it wasn't just daring, but it was also trying to do it in a safe way, right? Like NASA always worry about bringing people back safely from space. And that was kind of like, a failure, and I'm doing air quotes here for people listening to the podcast, because I certainly don't mean that, it was actually a success to bring it back. And I'm wondering how much have changed, and I want to point to the fact that actually the person that is hosting the event, it's a theoretical physicist, Brian Greene, which is not an astronaut, not a speaker, but actually I think it tells something about that multi-field approach that there is to space. You mentioned agriculture. There is so much lateral investment into it. So I know it's a mouthful what I said, but this connection between how it changed it, celebrating the people that allow us to actually get to the point where we are today, and the fact that that there is a theoretical physicist introducing all of these, and the awards that goes to people that are really investing in it.
Yeah, so it was fascinating. This idea came about. We had the discussion with a couple of different stakeholders in the space market, and it's the first year. So we thought, okay, look, let's start this and kind of get the ball rolling on initiative that is really required in the market. Little did we realize the type of engagement we were going to get from the market. We were absolutely gobsmacked, and that's come from the fact that there's been so many different judges and stakeholders wanting to get involved. We ended up having 516 nominations from 38 different countries. Wow. And that to us was a huge, huge eye opener, because we were worried whether we'll even get 150, 200 nominations for the first one. And the way that the community has engaged with this has been phenomenal. And it just shows that it was the right time. The industry, or the domain, as I refer to it, needed something like this. There are other award type events that happen in space, and they all have their place in the market. But one of the things that we were very adamant of in this was making it a true red carpet celebration moment for the domain, making sure that it is everything from research right through to scaling businesses and investments, not just a focus on one of those areas. And the reason why I think that's so important is it brings the narrative together. How do people look at what's happening in labs and on the ISS, what the different type of impact that research is having, into turning that into some sort of actual business, and then being able to scale that where it has such impact on humanity. So by bringing all of this together into one program, you're able to see that journey right through, how it's gone from research, how it's gone through from actually making those impacts into real life and real world.
Yeah. Can you give me, me and the audience that maybe, I'm assuming if they're listening to me, they probably love space, but they may not have that knowledge to understand the economy that is developing there. And when I look at the award you're giving, you're talking serious business here. Like you're talking space partnership, innovation breakthrough, science breakthrough, but also sustainability. And then you're talking about Superscaler of the Year award. I mean, it's almost like an investment, event, instead of just space talked by physicists and by, rocket scientists and so on. So the dimension really has changed. And I'm wondering if you can bring some concrete example of what can happen right now, not in the sci-fi world, but right now, what can happen to space in the next 5-10 years or so?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as you said there, like you mentioned having the fact that we've got Brian Greene hosting the event, the physicist who actually comes at this, and one of the reasons that we chose to go with Brian Greene and we think he had so much value is because he gets the actual science behind all of this and is able to narrate that in a way in which people like myself who have no technical background can understand. And only then can something become available to the masses, is when people who are not technical, people who actually just understand the basics of those, can actually start applying that into their day-to-day lives. So that's one of the reasons we went with Brian Greene, because he does such a great job at taking the very geeky, very hard to understand physics behind space and the environment and the domain there into how it kind of comes into day-to-day life. So that was one of the parts there that I think are really important for this. But then going forward, looking at what will space provide for us in the next few years, as you asked, and some concrete examples. The ISS has been a hub for research and development since inception. Big pharmaceutical companies have been doing testing on the ISS for how different chemicals react together on a molecular level. What happens when you combine different types of things? How can you create new type of material? How can you create new types of chemistry? And the thing is that there's been a lot of research that's happened there and been parked because it didn't make sense to then start doing the production of that in space. So it's like, yep, okay, we know from the ISS as an example, crystallization process in space happens much, much better in space than it does here on Earth. And the reason for that is because microgravity plus the vacuum enables us to have the crystals forming in uniformity and without the flaws, because you've not got the heavier molecules dropping or heavier parts dropping to the bottom and the lighter parts rising. It actually creates a bit more of a flawless crystal with the uniformity across the crystal structure. The impact of that, when you apply that into something like pharmaceuticals, is huge, because that then changes how we take certain treatments. For example, if we look at treatments like chemotherapy, in which currently you have to go to a hospital and intravenously have a treatment for the chemotherapy, which takes several hours, and you're sitting in a hospital over that period of time. By having these types of treatments made with the materials in space, you're able to shift how we take those treatments from something like an intravenous treatment over the span of several hours into a subcutaneous treatment that is actually a lot more beneficial to that particular disease and can be taken in a care center or even better at home. And that's just one example of how space itself is going to have such a huge impact on humanity.
Yeah, because people think about space. I remember actually having an interview with Aileen Collins, which is an amazing woman. Her documentary's coming out now. First female captain of the space shuttle and 3 times up there. She was telling me, a lot of people think about space as one thing, but there is actually a different level of how much do you go into space, how deep you go into space, and how extremely much more complicated it gets every thousands of kilometers that you go up. But also it's fascinating how the entire scenario, the entire environment change, and it does allow to do things that you just described. I can even imagine the things that we can do on the surface of the moon, and not just rare mineral, which is everybody's talking about it, but actually improve our humanity on Earth. And I think that is that the answer. When somebody asks, why do we spend so much money to go in space?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think a lot of the misconception, and there's a couple of parts on this, is we have so much there's so much need to spend money here on Earth to solve problems like poverty, for food crisis, etc. Right. Why are we spending billions of dollars into space? And although there is some element of, okay, fine, there is yeah, okay, we could spend money on food poverty, on the food crisis, on poverty, etc. But what we're getting out of the development and the understanding of space has such huge impact here for us. As an example, going on to kind of the food supply chain and that side, by utilizing Earth observation data, we can better understand how our farms across the world are. We can create more efficiencies with them. We can get them to grow better crops. We can actually help on what types of crops they're growing. So there's impact from space even on that side. But people don't think about the implication of space. And why I keep talking about it as a space domain is because it is truly something that does have that impact there. Now, all of a sudden, we end up getting better and more productive farming by utilizing better Earth observation data. We're able to increase the amount of flow on that side, increase the amount of supply. So there is an argument, which I very strongly believe in, clearly, because that's what we invest in and that's what we're doing, around why we should continue investing in space, in innovation on that side, because the return that comes back is crazy. We're talking more than kind of like 20 times the investment that's been made is the impact that it's having here on Earth for humanity. Now, this is just the first element. Like over the next 5 to 15 years, we're going to see a huge amount of benefit that's going to be coming through from the innovation in space for us on Earth living our day-to-day lives. But then we've not even touched on, and you mentioned it very briefly, but we've not even touched on what does that look like when it comes to the moon surface, the lunar economy. What does it look like when we are actually able to utilize the different materials from space? And there is an even bigger opportunity on that side, and how that then again is impacting humanity, not just on Earth at that point, but then also humanity moving forward as well.
Yeah. And I think it's a scale of time as well. Like people think, well, we can do something right now, but I think when you look at space, you're looking at a larger return on investment, even if it's going to take, a little longer, maybe a lot longer, but the return, you got to start somewhere. I guess that's the point. I know you have limited time. I could talk about this forever. Let's go back for a second, and then maybe you can do, the final, your final opinion on why this first event is so important, and I hope there are going to be many more. To go back to the awards that you're giving to the legacy of James Lovell, and why, of all the people being in space, some actually did walk on the moon, many of them. Why did you choose James?
I think that can be captured in one of his most famous quotes. That comes down to, and I've looked this up here, but one of his famous quotes was, "There are people who make things happen, there are people who watch things happen, and then there are people who wonder what happened. To be successful, you need to be a person who makes things happen." And that quote literally lives, that's how he lived his life. Yeah. That is something his kids have said he lived his life by and passed on to them. And I think that is definitely something that people in the space industry, knowingly or unknowingly, probably work and live by as well. Because a lot of people involved in something like space are really making things happen. They're taking those risks. They're taking those chances on, if I do this, yes, okay, there's a whole chance of failure, but actually if this works, and even if there's a small chance, there's such a huge opportunity. That was the same case for James when going to space, especially back then. Like, look at the potential percentage of failure for their mission and what all those different variables and how things could have gone wrong. Yet you had James and the other two astronauts along with him that actually went in, pushed boundaries, and continued their mission. That's the kind of legacy we want for people in the space industry.
Yeah, I love it. I can absolutely see the connection. I love to look at the past to understand the future and to look at where we are in the present. So very excited about this. I hope I can make it. I'm not sure, but it will be my dream to see this event happen in that environment, again, at the Natural History Museum of London. This is happening on Friday, December the 5th. And I truly hope it's going to be the first of many, of course.
It will, absolutely.
And,
but I look forward to having you there as well, Marco. It would be great to have you with us.
I hope so, and I hope that our conversation doesn't end here. Maybe I'll get you back and tell me how it went, and if I'm there, then that's a different story. I would love to stay in touch to even the company that are actually being connected and awarded, because I think obviously that's exciting for someone like me that look at society and technology. So I want to thank you for your time. Best of luck for the event, either I'm there or not. I'm sure it's going to be a success. And Sanj, really honored that you took the time to spend it with me.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us on and giving us the platform to talk about this. We are super excited. In the next coming days, we will be announcing the finalists from the stratosphere. So we're sending up a screen on a balloon into the stratosphere, and we'll be announcing the finalists for each of the awards there. So do look out for that as well. I look forward to continuing the conversation, either myself or with others in the team, to understand who the winners were, why they won, and how we're going to continue this going forward.
Yeah, and I invite everybody to stay tuned here on the Redefining Society and Technology podcast and learn what is going to happen after these, hopefully next year as well. And I mean, you're launching a balloon app, so I'm going to invite people to just look up.
Yeah, exactly.
No?
Exactly.
That's my advice. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. Thank you, Sanj. Take care.